If you experience food guilt, you are not going to want to miss this episode. In this episode, I'm going to help you overcome the feeling of food guilt and build a healthy, happy relationship with food. Welcome to the What's Eating You podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I'm a psychologist, published author, and public speaker here to educate and validate. Enjoy the show. Welcome back. If you're new, my name is Steph, and I'm a clinical psychologist with expertise in the area of eating disorders and disordered eating. Let's get into the show. It's another Freestyle Friday, and I was thinking about what am I going to talk about? Should I talk about motivation, dopamine, food guilt, the week? And I'm just going to talk about it all. So this episode is a Freestyle Friday, which means I don't really have a plan or a script. I'm just going to go with off the cuff, what I've been noticing this week, what I've experienced myself, and somehow link it and hope that it's useful for you, but I know it will be. I'm going to talk about food guilt because this is something that has come up a lot with the women I work with in Food Freedom. And if you're new here, I run a program called Food Freedom. It's a 12-week online program that helps you overcome binge eating, bulimia, and much more when it comes to food. Food guilt is the experience of feeling bad, guilty, shameful, or just experiencing negative feelings following eating something. Usually people will report that it happens because they're eating something they perceive as unhealthy, which is really interesting because you can have food guilt if you eat something you perceive as unhealthy, or you can have food guilt if you eat more than you think you should, or if you are eating the wrong times, if you're eating the wrong food groups. So basically the guilt means obsessively focusing on whether foods are good or bad and feeling ashamed if you've had too much or any of the ones you think are wrong. Now this can lead to unhealthy worry, stress, shame, and disordered eating. Where does it come from? And as I go through this episode, I want you to grab a pen and reflect on this for you. Number one, do you experience food guilt? Yes or no? The second question I want you to ask yourself is, where did it come from? When did you first start noticing you experienced guilt when it came to food? So for me, I remember I used to love eating bread, and then I had a photo shoot. I did some modeling when I was 15, and the photographer said, "Oh, you look bloated. You shouldn't eat before you come to a shoot." And then that made me feel guilty for eating bread. So that's where it started for me. So usually food guilt often stems from external messages that categorize food deemed to be either healthy or good or unhealthy. Most of these guilt-ridden foods are foods that are higher in fat or sugar, or both of which diet culture commonly victimizes, right? We all grew up in this era of diet culture where it's like, oh, don't eat sugar, don't eat carbs, don't eat too much, have this much on your plate, weigh your food, do your calories. So it's really hard to actually unravel this, but I want you to consider, where did it come from? When's the last time you actually didn't feel guilty when you ate something, and why? So this is usually when the goal of eating healthily is taken to the extreme, such as diets with clean eating or preconceived unhealthy food. This usually gives us feelings of guilt. But the guilt is worse than the food. Let me say that again. The guilt is worse than the food, okay? Having some chocolate isn't going to drastically change your life. You're not going to gain all this weight overnight. But the guilt leaves long-standing impacts to your mental and emotional well-being, right? Because when we feel guilty, we associate ourselves with being bad for eating a particular food. This ignites a psychological cascade of spiral of negative thinking, of self-blame, right? And we internalize this and think, it's my fault. I should have more control. What's wrong with me? And we think it's about willpower. But here's the thing you need to know. It's not about willpower at all. Studies demonstrate that those who associate indulgent foods with guilt are more likely to feel less in control over such foods when under stress. So willpower has nothing more than diet culture's excuse for the reason why diets don't work, designed to shift the blame from the diet to the dieter. And while food guilt might not pose major restraints on everyone, studies show that even the mere thought of indulgent food can spark guilt in those with restrictive eating habit. And I remember reading a study where they had a cake, and basically people who thought the cake was unhealthy and indulgent and fattening actually had less control over eating the cake than the people who had no preconceived ideas about the cake. Now, why does this happen? Essentially, when we break it down, guilt comes down to thinking you are doing something wrong. So I want you to reflect on when food guilt shows up for you. For me, I used to feel really guilty if I had a plan and an expectation of myself. Oh, I'm going to eat clean all day, I'm going to eat healthy. And then the minute I had chocolate, because I was breaking a food rule, that would make me feel guilty because I felt I was doing something wrong, right? So what do you think you're doing wrong? And I want you to ask yourself a really deep question. If I was to eat this food and not feel guilty, in what world would that be possible? What would need to be different? Okay, so if you were going to eat full fat chocolate at 12 o'clock, just because you're going to have a Mars bar, not some clean powder chocolate version, and you're going to eat that and be happy and satiated and enjoy it without feeling guilty, in what world would that be okay for you? How would that actually happen? And I asked this to one of the girls I'm working with, and she said, when I have my dream body, then I won't feel guilty when I'm eating this chocolate. And I said, okay, let's unpack that. So you're telling me the only way you're going to feel not guilty eating chocolate every day is if you have your dream body, right? Which for many people is unrealistic, this dream body. In order to, quote unquote, get that dream body, what are you going to have to do? Restrict, diet, starve yourself? What are the consequences of having to go down this path? And she was like, yeah, you're right. She's like, I wouldn't. She's like, if I wanted my dream body, like I wouldn't be able to eat chocolate at all. And the thing is, when you lose weight, if you do get your dream body, quote unquote, first of all, we know 95% of people who lose weight gain it plus interest within a 5-year period. But those 2 to 5% of people who keep the weight loss off, it's because they adhere to very strict dietary measures on a consistent basis. They make it their life. They're tracking, they're weighing forever because they don't know how to intuitively eat. So even if I said, even when we spoke, I said to her, okay, so even if you got your dream body, do you think you're going to be able to eat food every day without guilt? Do you think magically when you have your dream body, you're going to be able to eat chocolate without guilt? To maintain that low body weight, to maintain that physique, you have to be restrictive. I know because I've seen it. I see these people with the perfect bodies and they live it, they breathe it. All they eat is the same thing. They don't deviate. They've got mental health issues, right? But they're usually in the industry, so they are monetizing off this. So you have to really ask yourself, in what world would I eat chocolate and not feel guilty about it? Now, whatever the answer is to that, that's what you need to work with. And then you need to really challenge yourself. Is this realistic? Is it achievable? Because the guilt increases cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. When you feel guilty, you feel stressed. When you're in cortisol, you're going to hold on to more. You're going to feel inflamed, right? And then if you feel bad, you're going to likely eat more and worse food and perpetuate this vicious cycle. I feel so bad. I don't want to feel this way. I'm just going to binge eat and avoid it. And I'm just going to purge and avoid it. Purging leads to weight gain over time as well. Right. So how to stop feeling guilty? Here's the easiest thing. 1, honor your food decision before you make it, right? Because if your thoughts and your actions are aligned, you're not going to feel guilty. So for example, if you say, oh, I should be eating healthy, but then you decide to go get yochi, of course, you're going to feel guilty because your thoughts and your actions are not aligned. So, the first thing we need to identify is where our thought and our feeling and our actions are not aligned. Okay. So, the next time you go to eat something that makes you feel guilty, I want you to honor this decision and say, I'm going to eat this Mars bar. I am choosing to eat this. Okay. Not every food I need to eat needs to be nutritionally dense. I can eat for psychological health and well-being. And on some days, that's going to be a salad. And on some days, it's going to be a Mars bar. And I know that this dialogue sounds crazy and intense, but you have to speak to yourself this way because we have to undo the voice inside your head. And that takes time and practice. Okay. So whether it's a bowl of veggies or an ice cream sundae, remind yourself that all foods fit into a balance. And sometimes that balance is a little off kilter, okay? There's going to be some weeks where maybe your soul foods are a little bit higher, and that's okay. And there's going to be some weeks where maybe your whole foods are a little bit higher, okay? Food is not only meant to nourish our physical performance, or food's not just there for fuel. Everyone's like, food is fuel. Yes, that can help. That's important. But food is also there for psychological well-being. And this is why if you're not hungry, if you're eating past the point of feeling full, the second shift is, so shift number 1 was align your thoughts with your action. Shift number 2 is validate yourself and give yourself self-compassion, right? Because disordered eating and food guilt are normalized in our culture, and it's impossible not to have a heightened awareness of food we often think of as being less clean or less nourishing, right? So we need to unlearn the messages of diet culture. Now, this takes a lot of proactive work and self-reflection, okay? So as mentioned earlier, once you realize when you're experiencing guilt, what you're going to do is you're going to start to break the rules. You're going to start eating foods that don't feel safe. And this is what the women in my group are currently doing, but they're like, Steph, I still feel guilty, okay? So what you're going to do is honor your decision. And then the second thing is compassion. And say, do you know what? For so many years, I didn't allow myself to eat this. And I'm really happy and grateful that I can eat this now. Like, poor me. You know what? I went through all these years denying myself, starving myself. And what? Now I'm going to feel guilty for eating this? No. Give yourself the same compassion that you would give a friend. And the last thing is, I want you to really engage in mindful eating. The biggest issue with food guilt is when you're eating something you think you shouldn't be eating, people tend to eat it very rapidly, very quickly, very urgently, because they think, oh, if it's gone, then I don't have to deal with it. But you need to do the opposite. The food that makes you feel the worst and the most guilty is the food you should eat the slowest and most presently. Okay? So all I want you to do is when you have this food, honor the decision, accept that it's happening, and start to breathe. Take a deep breath and notice how the food looks. Notice how the food tastes. Notice how it feels in your mouth. This is called mindful eating, and all it really means is being fully present in the moment and being present with the chocolate you're eating or with the cheese or whatever it is. Don't rush it. This is your special moment. Be fully present, enjoy it. And when you're finished, congratulate yourself. Be curious, don't be judgmental. Say, I'm so proud of myself. I ate this when in the past this has been so detrimental to me. I'm okay. I'm still the same person that I had before. I'm still the same person I was before. Just remember, everyone, that guilt, shame, and negative feelings after eating really limits your mental and emotional space available for your life, available for your partners, available for your children, available for your friends. It's literally a time thief. Okay? If you experience food guilt, you have probably gone through dieting and diet culture. And the key is to start to identify when food guilt creeps up and how you can start to identify it and be kind to yourself and validate your experience and enjoy the moment. Because guess what? Food guilt doesn't give you anything. It actually takes away more than you think it does. And if you need help with this, book a one-on-one call with me. It's a free eating evaluation call. We can go through what's going on for you. And if you're already in my program, a massive thank you for inspiring this podcast. You are amazing. And I'm so proud because I know this journey is hard, but it's hard living with an eating disorder or disordered eating. If this was helpful, please leave a rating, leave a review, and let me know on Instagram. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I am truly grateful for you being here. If you got something out of today's show, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. To access more resources or support, check out the show notes below. See you next time.